Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going straight to the heart of your source material, which it all centers on this single short passage from the Bible, John chapter 12, to really examine something universal. We're talking about the nature of worship, and maybe more importantly, its dangerous flip side,
Yeah.
hypocrisy.
And this passage is so powerful because it just sets up the clearest possible contrast. I mean, you have a simple dinner party in a town called Bethany, and at that table you see two people, Mary and Judas.
Right.
They're both followers, at least on the surface. But their actions in this one moment reveal these completely different objects of devotion. It's almost like an instruction manual on genuine commitment versus self-interest.
And we can't even start without this massive idea your sources lead with. It's a quote from Tim Keller, but it goes way back.
Yeah, almost 500 years.
Our heart is an idol factory. It just hits you. The idea that we are perpetually, building our own gods out of stuff.
It speaks to the human condition perfectly. It really does. We are built to worship. So if we don't direct that energy toward the divine, we immediately point it somewhere else, at created things.
So it's not a religious problem, it's a human problem.
And it's a human problem, exactly. And the list of modern idols the sources give, it's shockingly subtle.
It is. We're not talking about golden calves here. The list is things like our work, our relationships, success, our reputation.
Control, comfort, the approval of others.
Yes. We take these things that are fundamentally good and we start demanding that they give us something that really only God could provide, that they satisfy us.
And that's where the sacrifice comes in. We think of sacrifice in these very religious terms, but the sources make it chillingly clear.
Yeah.
Every single idol demands a sacrifice from you.
Always.
Always. You find yourself sacrificing your peace of mind for the idol of success. Or maybe you sacrifice your integrity for the idol of acceptance. Time, rest, family. They're all on the altar for something.
So that's the paradox, isn't it? Worship is inevitable. You don't get to choose if you worship.
You only choose what you worship.
And our task today is to see how that choice, that object of worship, determines whether our lives look like Mary's or like Judas's.
Okay, so let's set the stage, because the context here isn't just background detail. It's basically the fuse on the bomb. We're in Bethany. It's 6 days before the Passover, and the air is just thick with danger. Just before this dinner, Jesus did something stunning.
He raised Lazarus.
He raised Lazarus, Mary's brother, from the dead. After 4 days in the tomb. I mean, this wasn't just a healing. This was a reversal of death itself.
And that's the miracle that basically signed his death warrant.
Precisely. It forced the hand of the Sanhedrin, the ruling council.
Yeah.
They saw his reputation surging, and they decided, look, this is a direct threat to our power, to our stability with Rome.
So he had to go.
He had to go. The death penalty was the only solution they saw. So everyone at this dinner knows Jesus is a marked man. The tension is incredibly high.
And you've got Jesus, of course. Martha is serving. Lazarus is there at the table.
Which is just an amazing detail. A living, breathing testament to Jesus' power, just lounging at the dinner table.
Yeah. And then you have Mary, the disciples, and, of course, Judas.
There's one other little detail that's critical. The sources mention they were reclining at the table. Now, we don't need a whole lecture on first-century furniture,
Right.
but they were basically lying on their sides, propped up on an elbow, with their feet stretched out behind them, away from the low table.
Which is key for what's about to happen.
It makes Mary's action possible, and it makes it very, very public. So the stage is set. Mary's selfless act becomes the blueprint for true worship, and Judas's reaction becomes the absolute definition of hypocrisy.
Okay, let's get to Mary's act. Verse 3. She takes a pound of pure nard, this incredibly expensive ointment, anoints Jesus' feet, and then does something even more shocking. She wipes them with her hair. This one action is just loaded with meaning.
What's so fascinating is just the radical nature of the gift itself. It wasn't just expensive, it was her capital. We hear Judas, a little later, put a price on it. 300 denarii.
And we really need to understand what that means. A denarius was a day's wage for a common laborer.
So 300 denarii.
Yeah.
You're talking about a full year's salary.
An entire year's income, poured out in a single moment. It's not a tithe, it's not a portion, it was everything.
It's total surrender. The source argues that the true measure of worship is what it costs you, and Mary's sacrifice was, well, it was brutal. It cost her everything she had.
But the financial cost is only half of it. The cultural cost, what she did, was maybe even more shocking.
Letting her hair down in public.
Yes. For a Jewish woman in that culture, that was absolutely taboo. It was scandalous. It was an act of complete vulnerability, just a total disregard for her own reputation.
That's the key, isn't it? If she was worried about the idol of what other people think, the idol of approval, she never would have done this.
Yeah.
She took on the posture of a slave washing feet and used her own glory, her hair, and her entire fortune to do it. It is just a pure, unthinking response to the person who gave her brother back.
There was no self-consciousness there, no performance. It was spontaneous. It was just an overflow of gratitude for who Jesus was and what he'd done.
And then Jesus gives it this interpretation. He says she was, without even knowing it, preparing his body for burial.
Which elevates it even more. It's not just a nice gift. It becomes this prophetic act. She was anointing a king for his death while everyone else was still thinking about politics and power.
So the source material really drives it home. It defines genuine worship as obedient action motivated by the beauty of who God is. And it has to cost you something tangible, your time, your money, your reputation. It has to be selfless.
Okay, so then the narrative it slams on the brakes. The contrast comes in a single word in the next verse. But. Mary offered everything, but Judas Iscariot, and the text makes sure we know he's the one who will betray him, he speaks up.
And he immediately goes for this spiritual-sounding critique.
Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? I have to pause here because on the surface, Judas is making a good point, right? Caring for the poor is a command. How do the sources handle this? Why is he a hypocrite when he sounds like he's advocating for charity?
That is the absolute heart of the issue, and it's why hypocrisy is so dangerous. Judas is using a good thing, caring for the poor, as a weapon. And John, the author, immediately pulls the curtain back in the next verse to show us the real motive.
He exposes him.
Completely. He says Judas said this not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of the money bag, and he regularly helped himself to what was inside.
Wow. So in that moment when Mary pours out her life savings, Judas doesn't see an act of beautiful worship.
No.
He sees a 300 denarii personal financial loss. His idle money personal gain was just threatened.
Exactly. His worship was destructive because it was entirely self-focused. He didn't care about the poor. He cared about the margin he could skim off for himself. He was willing to publicly shame this woman for her devotion just to look spiritual and, hopefully divert that cash back into the pot he controlled.
He weaponized spirituality. It's the ultimate religious performance.
And Jesus just shuts it down immediately. He tells Judas, leave her alone. And then he says that line that's been debated for centuries. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me.
He's not dismissing the poor.
Not at all. He's acknowledging that caring for the poor is an ongoing vital command. But he's pointing to a unique, finite, unrepeatable moment in history. His death is days away. This act of preparing his body for burial is a fleeting opportunity for ultimate devotion.
And the sources connect this rebuke, this public exposure of his greed, directly to his betrayal.
They do. They point to Mark's gospel, which suggests that this specific moment, being publicly shut down and denied his greedy scheme, is what sends Judas off to make the deal. To sell Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, it was the last straw for his self-worship.
It's such a sharp warning against what the sources call performance worship. They bring in the prophet Isaiah, talking about honoring God with your lips while your heart is far from him.
And we learn that true worship isn't about manufacturing some kind of emotion for a show. Judas had plenty of theatrical outrage. True worship flows from an obedient heart, and it results in action that actually honors God, not ourselves.
So this deep dive really clarifies the conflict, but let's synthesize the main takeaways about our priorities. The source material makes a really provocative statement about the purpose of the church itself.
It's a statement that completely reorders how many people think. The source states that the chief purpose of the church is simply worship. And then it quotes a famous line from a book on missions. Missions exists because worship doesn't.
That's a huge challenge. We often think that good works, activism, charity, helping the poor, that's the highest goal.
Right.
But this viewpoint creates a clear hierarchy. Serving the poor is essential, yes, but it's the fruit of worship, not the root. Worshipping Jesus is primary. Serving has to flow from that.
Because if you prioritize the serving without the worship, you risk making the service itself your idol. You risk making your own good work the source of your value, which is exactly what Judas was doing.
He wanted credit for the good deed.
He wanted credit, and he wanted the cash. Mary showed us that her selfless act, the gift and the humility, it was all fueled by her pre-existing devotion to a person.
So the lesson is just crystal clear. Mary's path is selfless surrender, a devotion that costs you something real. And Judas's path is selfish, hypocritical, focused on what you can gain.
And the call is for that complete surrender. The sources even mention something like raising hands in a worship service. It's an exterior posture of surrender that's meant to reflect an interior worship. The point is to worship freely without that self-consciousness, because you're not looking at yourself or what others think. You're looking at the object of your devotion.
That's the difference right there. Mary was intimate, Judas was performing, and for you listening, that's the essential question, isn't it? Are your good actions about affirming the devotion you feel, or are they tools for building up your own reputation?
This deep dive has shown us, I think, in the clearest possible terms, that your heart is going to produce worship. It's inevitable. You just have to choose if that worship is aimed at Jesus, the one who's worth sacrificing everything for, or if it's aimed at yourself, which always leads to hypocrisy and loss.
Which brings us to this final, really challenging thought that the sources bring up from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus warns that on the final day, there will be people who looked incredibly spiritual. They did all the right things publicly.
They say, Lord, Lord. They prophesy. They cast out demons in his name.
All the performances. And yet, when they stand before him, he says to them, I never knew you.
And if the ultimate goal of life, as the source says, is to glorify God and enjoy him forever, then the crucial question isn't just what acts of worship you perform. It's not about how costly your service looks on the outside. It's whether the object of your worship actually knows you.
So as you think about this, we challenge you to consider, what are the actions or activities in your life? The ones that might look spiritual or good or successful to everyone else, but might be subtly driven by that self-worship, that need for approval, the ones that risk that final devastating verdict, I never knew you. That, in the end, is the ultimate price of hypocrisy.